that's going to happen. And at the end of the session, when I receive the recorded link, I will forward that recorded link to everyone so you can go back and review some of the questions and the session at a later date. And I think that's it. So I'm going to have Dana and Sarah start. And you guys ready? Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to the session on the E-rating workshop. My name is Sarah Zarrelli and I am a mentor and a pre-enrollment advisor here at Empire State. And I'm also being joined by Dana Hanson, who is also a mentor and academic advisor at Empire State with the Center for Distance Learning.
One of my mentees in the room.
Okay, Marcus, we're gonna try to see if we can correct that. Can you hear me, Marcus? If you could just hit the smiley icon if you can hear me, Marcus.
I can hear you.
Can anybody hear me? All right, Marcus, you can hear me, great. My guess is you can't hear Dana. Is that correct? Again, the smiley icon if you can't hear Dana. Not that that is a good thing. Okay. All right, let me see if we can kind of correct that. So give me a moment.
Hello? Here?
Yeah.
You can hear me. If you would put a little smiley face, that would be great. All right, I'm going to basically have to shout, so I'm going to start over again. Again, my name is Dana, and I'm from Empire State College. I am an academic advisor and mentor here, and I see one of my mentees in the room, so thank you for joining. First, we just wanted to begin by having you all look at a couple of sample emails and have in mind the questions that are on the slide now. You know, who would you hire? Who would you go on a date with? Who would you guess would be the most successful in their academic career, and which would you respond to faster? So we're going to turn the slide and just give you a couple of seconds to read an email, and then we're going to continue, and there's just going to be about 4 of them. You don't have to read everything, but we would like you to just get the gist of them.
If anyone is having a difficult time reading that, just let me know and we can actually read it out loud if necessary. Okay?
Okay, I hope that you had enough time to read those. We just, again, wanted you to get the gist of what people were trying to say and have in mind those questions again. I can go back to the questions. I can go back to the questions if you'd like. But again, you know, the questions were, who would you hire? Who would you go on a date with? Who would you guess would be the most successful in their academic career, and which would you respond to more quickly? So if you read the emails, we picked some emails that actually Sarah and I have got from gotten from some of our mentees and other correspondence with staff and faculty, and we just wanted you to have an idea of what some realistic things that go on occur and how we see them. So I mean, you can type in if you want to add your perspective and what you thought about some of the emails, or if you wanted to respond to some of the questions. But if one of you want to just answer if any of these emails is from a person that you might hire for a job, what do you think? So F says no, and I don't blame you. Yes. Okay, and which do you feel would be most successful in their academic career? Anybody? Nobody. I'll just take that as a no. And yes, that's why we picked these emails specifically, because we knew what your response would be. I believe it was Susan's email. Right, and we'll go back to Susan's email. Hers is sort of appropriate, but there's something in there that's a little bit questionable, and we'll address that later. So thank you, Wesh, I want to say. I hope that I'm not mispronouncing. Oh, Anne, okay. So now we're going to go on and just go over what we're going to do in the workshop today, and Sarah's going to do that.
Hi everybody. We're going to talk a little bit today. We're going to go over this group exercise just a little bit more. We're going to go over specifically what does e-writing mean, and we'll give you a definition for e-writing. And then more specifically, what's professional e-writing versus maybe e-writing that you just communicate with a friend, casually, or family members. We're going to talk about some common e-writing behaviors, and then Dana and I actually conducted a survey of people that we work with of what is appropriate and inappropriate e-writing behavior. So we're going to go over some of those results with you and some commentary that we received from people. And hopefully those will help you when you're communicating with your professors and your mentors and things like that, knowing what sorts of things they look for and what sorts of things they find unacceptable. We're going to talk about how you address inappropriate e-writing behavior. So if someone's writing to you inappropriately, how would you address that? And then we're going to go over some tips and strategies just to help you in your everyday academic and professional career. And then finally, we're just going to go over some e-resources that will kind of help with organization when it comes to e-writing. We certainly will have questions at the end, but as Terry mentioned at the beginning, if you have a question at any point in time, feel free to just type it into the chat box and we'll get to it as soon as possible. So thinking about those sample emails again, we had a few questions here. What would you change about them? What did you find inappropriate? And what did you find appropriate? So if you all just want to write in the chat section area, what would you change about these emails? And if anyone wants us to go back to any of them, just type that in there as well, and we'll flip back to some of them. But maybe if anything in particular stuck out to you. And I would turn the caps off. I have to agree. All capital letters sometimes comes across to readers if you're shouting at them. Michael, tone, grammar, syntax, spelling, grammar, and format. Yes, again, a lot of times people write emails in a hurry and they just send them out and they don't think about the format or the grammar, checking spell check before you send that email. A lot of your email systems nowadays will allow you to automatically check spelling before you hit the send button. So that's something I always recommend to people. Anything else stick out to anyone? Any chance of a quick view? Sure. This is one of them. That's the all cap one. Okay. This is the one that we mentioned was from Susan. Can you hear me now? Marquise? Okay, and then this is one more sample email that we provided with you. That was the first one. Lack of cohesion, yes. I agree on that. Some of them are a little scattered. What about some of the signature lines? Did any of that stick out to anyone? We have a couple of people who signed their emails with things like much love. Yeah, with love is inappropriate, and I agree. It's fine if you're sending that to your boyfriend or your mother or something like that. But to send an email to your mentor with your signature line is much love, could be crossing a line there. A lot of times, again, people put signature lines on the end of their emails and don't actually think about removing them for certain people. So it's something else you want to think about. We also even have on this email here a little picture that someone's included at the end of their email. And again, those aren't always the most appropriate when you're in a professional setting. Organization, concise. Yep. A lot of times it's easier for people to get to your point if you get to your point quicker. For example, on this one, there's lots of dots and lots of question marks, and it's a little hard to figure out what exactly is going on in the email. It's definitely a stream of consciousness writing. Okay, well, we're going to move on. We just wanted to send those to you as some samples. These are emails that we've actually received, so fairly common. And we all kind of do some of these habits from time to time, so we're not trying to fault anyone, but just giving you some things to think about as you move forward with your academic career. Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we just want to address specifically what is professional e-writing, because you might have come to the workshop thinking, well, exactly what is it, and what are the differences between, professional and personal e-writing. We consider professional e-writing electronic communication in a professional setting that utilizes professional mannerisms. That would be grammar, spelling, and awareness of audience. Now, you may have a question as to what professional is, because especially as a student, it could be a hazy line. Technically as a student, you're not, in a professional setting per se, but, you are communicating with professionals. So, I would definitely, consider communication with, any higher ed personnel or staff or faculty as, e-writing in a professional setting. So what is e-writing? Here are some modes of e-writing that we just kind of outlined. You have personal email, work or school email, electronic memos, databases, public discussion boards, academic discussion boards, blogs, social networking sites like Twitter or Facebook or MySpace. So I don't know if you want to just jot down in our little chat section here which you believe might be professional e-writing. So we have some that might be personal. Which ones of these might be professional in a professional setting?
You can just type right in. Okay, so work and school. Great. Thanks, guys.
So, but which one of these specifically might you find in just the professional setting? Work in school, electronic memos, databases. What do you think about academic discussion boards? So when you sign into Angel, you log into Angel and you have discussion within your course, do you consider that as well? Great. So this next slide here is going to be what Sarah and I felt were would be considered in the professional setting, and it's certainly the ones that you all have mentioned. So work and school email, electronic memos, databases. If you have a database at work, you might use DataTel or PeopleSoft. Sometimes you have sections where you can write comments. Ishka Bibble says, if you consider yourself as a professional, your writing should always reflect that, and I completely agree. So even in our personal emails, sometimes, it might be useful to practice, professional writing. It can never hurt to be clear and concise and, professional, and not, kind of trace any borders there, because sometimes even in our personal emails, things can be construed the wrong way.
Okay, what we have here is a sample email of a good, strong sample email from someone to their mentor. There's a few things in here that we just wanted to point out to you that we think make it a strong professional email. Grammar is correct, punctuation is correct, spelling is correct, and it's very concise and to the point. As someone mentioned earlier, being to the point is very helpful for both the person sending the email and the person receiving the email. So I know going into this email, these are the questions that Jessica specifically has, and I can get back to her specifically addressing her concerns, which avoids sometimes those back and forth emails where you're still trying to figure out what the other person is saying to you. So utilizing bullet points is a good way to kind of make sure you're putting out what you need to know exactly, and the person responding to you can make sure they're responding exactly to that. Here are some common e-writing behaviors, and these are some things that Dana and I included in the survey that we conducted. So we have spelling mistakes, misuse of grammar and punctuation, usage of all capital letters, usage of all lowercase letters, usage of humor and or sarcasm, usage of emoticons, and usage of acronyms. And in a second, I'm going to go over what the survey results were. So what people thought were inappropriate and what people thought maybe were appropriate or not as inappropriate as some of the others. Is there anything on this list that stands out to someone as maybe very inappropriate? Nope. What about spelling mistakes? How do people feel about spelling mistakes? Is that something you would consider inappropriate? It's widespread, Michael. Yes, I agree.
But what about earlier somebody said something about usage of all capital letters?
Okay,
so,
and they're all inappropriate because they show lack of respect. I agree. Spell check can we incorporate in the course mail to reduce or eliminate spelling mistakes. Marquise, that's exactly right. In your course email, a lot of times in your work email, even in Google and Yahoo, sometimes now they have the function to make sure that you spell check either as you're typing or when you press send, it'll spell check for you. So I highly recommend everyone utilize that. How do people feel about the usage of emoticons, so smiley faces and things like that? It's too informal, okay. And a few are okay, exactly. And we'll go now to the results of our survey just so you can see some of those. As you can see, the usage of emoticons, the majority of our respondents were impartial on this. Some instructors use them a lot, some don't use them at all. Some people think they're appropriate, some don't. So that's kind of an iffy line there. We tend to tell people to, again, use your own discretion. I wouldn't go overboard with a lot of them, but again, some people think they convey emotion very well. So it's something you want to kind of use your own discretion on. Spelling mistakes, grammar and punctuation, all capital letters and all lowercase letters. The majority of our respondents found that all of these were inappropriate. And the majority of our respondents also found the use of acronyms to be inappropriate. And we'll go over acronyms a little bit later. There are some that are acceptable in an academic or professional setting because they're pretty common. But some of the more Twitter, Facebook, texting type acronyms are sometimes inappropriate in a professional setting. You have to keep in mind also that not everyone knows what all of those acronyms always mean. So we do have a slide on that a little later, so we'll cover it a little bit more in the next slide.
Okay, so some common e-writing email behaviors, signature lines with motivational quotes. So in an earlier email there was one with a motivational quote at the end, and sometimes with your personal email, like Sarah said earlier, you might forget that you actually have a motivational quote in your email because it's automatically signed when you send the email. But you should definitely, be cognizant of this. Because while there's some that are general and that can be, nice in any email, I would, err on the side of caution and, either not put it or, be able to, consider the audience and make sure that you remove it when it's appropriate. Signature lines with personal or religious quotes, images, symbols, pictures, or email letter closings. The email that we showed you earlier had a little bunny that was made out of symbols and things like that. In a personal email, it can be fine, but if somebody doesn't know you and how much you love bunnies, they might not be exactly comfortable with that, or they might feel that it's a little immature, I would think. I could be just assuming, but I'm giving you the feeling that I would think when opening an email like that. Personal or religious quotes are very personal. Religious quotes are very personal. Images, I've received emails that have pictures of people with their families and things like that, and that's a very personal thing. So you should definitely consider the audience. What we mean by lack of signature is you forget to sign your email. Now sometimes folks have the email set up so it automatically signs it when you send it, but make sure that that's the case, because it's often that professionals might receive an email and there's no name at the bottom, and we're sitting here trying to figure out who you are, and your email is ambiguous. It might be baseball player 101 at Yahoo, and it's a little confusing for us to figure out exactly who you are. So definitely be sure to sign your email at the end there. Michael says, correspondence from ESC, professional coffee lasting. Oh, that's interesting. So I will definitely, Michael, bring that back to ESC and make sure that the professionals actually give their signature, because that's extremely important, especially from a professional setting going out to going outwards externally. Group boards or casual emails in the workplace. This one really varies. Again, some people are comfortable with it, and I suppose it depends on what type of workplace you're in. But again, erring on the side of caution and considering not everybody might be comfortable with this. What do you guys feel about group forwards or casual emails in the workplace?
Okay, so Ann says, I'm not sure, and Michael says it's usually inappropriate. And just think, when we're talking about group forwards, we're maybe talking about an inside joke that someone sends to the whole office, pictures of kitty cats on computers that people send to everyone. Things look kind of along those lines.
Just another thing that's really common in the workplace, in academia anyway, I'm not sure about other workplaces, is reply to all emails. And what we mean by reply to all emails would be, perhaps somebody sends one email adding their insight to something, and then to a large group of people, and everybody decides to respond with their individual input. Now, it's one thing if it's really insightful and everything, but it's another thing if you just, if the group email reply to all is, I just had a baby, and everybody replies, congratulations, and you receive 100 congratulations emails. Again, it's considering the audience. Consider just emailing that individual back in all cases, because we all know what it's like to have a clogged up inbox. Isn't that right? So Anne says, yes, they are very distracting, especially ones with the send to this to 10 people, etc. Absolutely, I completely agree. Some people actually don't mind, and we'll actually get back to what the survey results are in a minute, what people thought of that. Personal email addresses that use sexual innuendos, physical characteristics, and or personal activities. What we mean by this could be, for instance, ItalianBabe99@yahoo.com, or player143@gmail.com. These are things that in a professional setting, tell the professional something about the individual that may or may not be true. And if you don't want that to be construed, and somebody to draw a conclusion, it's really best to have a very streamlined email address. Mine is, Dana.Hanson, because it's just my name. There's no way that somebody could draw an assumption from that. So, so now we're going to go on to the survey results.
Just one more thing on the personal email addresses. That's something you want to keep in mind too when you're even applying to a job. An employer might see, Sarah.Zarrelli is one thing, and it sends an impression that you're kind of setting a professional tone. But, baby mama drama 32 at Yahoo sends a whole different impression to an employer. So just something to keep in mind, not only just when you already have a job, but when you're applying for a job, what you're putting on your resume can say something about you as well.
So these are the survey results that we have. Surprisingly, Sarah and I were both surprised with some of these, that the majority of people were actually impartial to these things. Again, we are considering a setting where the majority of our co-workers at the Center for Distance Learning are constantly on the computer and using e-writing as their major form of correspondence. Any feelings about the results? All right, yeah, so most of you were surprised, as we were. We do have, if you wanted to know the actual percentages, we can also provide that to you. You can let us know at the end of the session, and we can always email you the actual percentages of people that agreed or disagreed or were impartial.
So earlier we had talked about acronyms, and here's a list of just a few of them that Dana and I came up with quickly. We'd like you to kind of look at the list of acronyms, and maybe if you can tell us, type into the little section, which ones of these do you think would be appropriate for use in a professional email? ASAP, yep, definitely ASAP and RSVP, again, are pretty common acronyms that are acceptable in professional writing. Anything else? OMG, Michael, so OMG, are you think that this would be appropriate in a professional email or inappropriate in a professional email? Inappropriate. Okay. Yes, I agree. OMG, if people don't know, is oh my god, and that it does kind of come across as inappropriate in a professional email. Someone else typed in FYI. Again, I think that's professional and can be used in a professional email. So LOL, just for those of you that don't know, laugh out loud, be right back, RSVP. I don't actually know the French for what that stands for. Talk to you later for your information. End of day. Oh my god, I don't know, and as soon as possible are what the acronyms actually stand for. And on this next slide, we have the ones that we think are appropriate in professional emails. So RSVP, FYI. EOD, which stands for end of day, is kind of used less often in academia and more kind of in the corporate world. Some of you may actually see this a lot in emails, and some maybe not so much. But it is professionally acceptable acronym, and ASAP as well. The only thing about ASAP is just be careful when you're saying it and how you're saying it and who you're saying it to. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating if someone hasn't corresponded with you in a really long time and then they send you something and say you need to do this ASAP. So while as a boss telling someone that it may come across okay, just be a little cautious before saying that to like a professor, telling them that you need or want something ASAP, because it can come across as a little rude sometimes. The other acronyms, as with all acronyms, over time they may become more socially acceptable or more professionally acceptable as an acronym gets used over and over in time. They do become part of our common everyday language. Same with some of these. They may not have started out as common everyday language like they are now. But for now, things that you would typically text to your friends or include in a Twitter post or something like that might be ones that you want to avoid using in a professional setting. Sometimes they don't come across very professional. And then you also have to keep in mind that not everyone knows what they mean either.
All right, so some of this, the next couple of slides are going to be the survey commentary. So we also, in addition to polling people for whether they felt something, felt strongly that something was inappropriate or appropriate, or whether they are impartial, we also ask them to write their thoughts, because sometimes things aren't as black and white. It really does depend on the setting. So our first comment here says, the whole use of the blind carbon copy, when is that okay? Replying with history, actually we'll just stop on that first one, actually, BCC. And I think that this one is kind of a common thing, especially in the professional workplace. When is it okay to blind carbon copy somebody? Does anybody have any feelings about that? Does everybody know what a blind carbon copy is? A blind carbon copy is when you copy somebody on an email. So you have the main person that you're sending it to. Then you might have somebody else that you're copying. But a blind carbon copy means that you can send an email to somebody without the main person that you're sending to knowing that you're actually sending it to someone else. Does that make sense? So Anne says that it can be used when the recipient knows that emails may be monitored, which is very true. If you know that you're in a professional setting, actually your emails can be monitored at any time. So you should always take into consideration that what you are writing, you never know who's actually receiving it. So again, another little push to be as appropriate as possible. Oh, Ev says, we use blind carbon copy to avoid getting 1,000 emails when somebody replies to all. That's a great thing there. That's when BCC is actually very useful. When you blind carbon copy somebody when you're sending out a group email, that makes it so that you don't know who the actual recipients of the email are. So if you have a list of personal emails that not everybody might be comfortable with sharing with others, you can use blind carbon copy. Right, when we are at Empire State College, sometimes I might, as a mentor, have to send a group email to my mentees. However, I'm not going to want to disclose everybody's personal email to one another, so I would do a blind carbon copy so that everybody can see the email, but not everybody can see each email address. You can access BCC usually in an email. There's the first line, which is the actual person that you're sending it to, which is public. The second line will usually be CC, which is carbon copy, and that means that the person that you're sending it to will be aware that you're actually copying the email and sending it to someone else. And BCC is usually located under CC. This is not available on all emails, but I want to say that it's a lot more common. So even you know, personal emails, just like Yahoo or Hotmail or Gmail, usually have the option for BCC nowadays.
Sometimes I know with Gmail that it's actually hidden, the BCC. You have to like click on another little link next to the sender or the subject line. Same with CC. Sometimes you can't see as clearly. So that could be someplace you could check if you're using like a Yahoo or a Gmail or a Hotmail.
I think where people get the most nervous about BCC is if you're having correspondence with somebody and you might perhaps blind carbon copy a supervisor on it or something like that. That's when people feel a little uncomfortable. So, but as far as sending a group email, I feel that it can be appropriate because you don't want to disclose personal information. Now, replying with history when history has not been checked for inappropriate content or questionable content. What we mean by replying with history is some emails will automatically, if you send an email and then somebody replies to you, will automatically populate the original email. Some emails do not do this. The email at Empire State College does not automatically do this. We have to actually click a special button that says reply with history. So if you're replying and the information from the original email automatically populates, if you're sending and including a third party in the email, you just might want to check the original email for content that is relevant to the person. It might not be correspondence that you want to share with another individual. You know, if there was personal information that was shared in the original email, or you know, whatever it may be. So just make sure that if the information from the original emails automatically populate, that you just you check that for inappropriate or questionable content. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. The third comment says, I appreciate when the writer uses my name at the opening of communication. Now this is just kind of nice. It's a greeting. It shows somebody that you're writing an email that's, you know, special for them, that you're trying to be, you know, professional and appropriate, and, you know, it's a salutation. So starting an email by just, you know, demanding what you're trying to say, or, you know, you go right into your statement, might be construed as rude. So it's always nice when you're addressing an email if you say, you know, hello Dana, and then get into the body of your email. Anne says, I often have trouble deciding whether to use Miss, Mrs., Mr., etc., or just the first name. You can just say dear and you know, put the person's name. I can always err on the side of caution and say using the person's last name, Mr. or Miss, and the last name. Miss is actually appropriate for Miss and Mrs. So you can use Ms. if you don't know if the person is married or not. And Mr. is just, you know, for any male person. So I hope that, does that help, Anne?
I would also say, Anne, take the cue from the person writing to you. So maybe the first time you write them, you say Mr. or Mrs. But if they continue to write you back, like sometimes my mentees will say to me, Miss Zarrelli, but I always sign Sarah. So if someone's always signing their email to you with their first name, then it's probably inappropriate, or it's appropriate to write them back using their first name. But if it's the first time you're corresponding with them, it certainly can't hurt to err on the side of caution using Mr. or Mrs. As opposed to going too informal.
Okay, and the last one here is I do appreciate emoticons because they add a feeling of dimension to communication and often help clarify ambiguous remarks or soften criticism. I also like quotes, symbols, etc. that folks put at the bottom of their pages because it gives some clue about their personalities. They should, of course, be in good taste. So again, emoticons are, very specific to, your audience. You should definitely, take a minute to think about exactly who you're writing to. But the person that wrote this is correct. Sometimes if you add a smiley face, it is less confusing as to whether, somebody is trying to be as tactful as possible or perhaps if they're making a joke. Sometimes sarcasm and humor is very difficult to sense in email, so a smiley face might lighten things a bit and give somebody an idea, exactly what your tone is. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Okay. Oh, interesting. So ESC introduced you to emoticons. Yeah, we have them available for you to use in Angel. So that's probably where you've seen them. Using them in class discussions, again, I think that it's appropriate. We do make it available to you. So we are saying, feel free to use it. But, again, I think that you have to be very cognizant of who you're using them to and how you're using them, and make sure that it's actually depicting, what you're trying to express. Martisa, it is very tough to anticipate how individuals will react to emoticons. So again, I think that if you are unsure, err on the side of caution, and you might not want to use them. Be clear in your thought, and think about if you're trying to be funny and what kind of humor, and if it's a personality thing and you feel that you might have to know the person or the person should know you, maybe you should give it a couple of emails and get to know the person before you feel comfortable enough to use an emoticon. Again, I agree with Jim. He says that symbols can clarify communication. So, again, they can be helpful, and sometimes, others won't like them. But perhaps, giving it some time to get to know the person that you're actually sharing this correspondence with can be very helpful.
Some of the other survey commentary we have here, I like positive messages even if the issue is not positive. I think you can put a positive spin on anything if you take the time to do so. And I think this is a good point. Sometimes, even if you're dealing with a negative issue, if you can handle it in a positive manner, it'll come across better to the person receiving the email. And then sometimes it's just a way to find the positive in the negative. And we're not saying you always have to sugarcoat everything, especially if you're a supervisor trying to convey something to a supervisee sometimes. But certainly when you're communicating with a professor or a mentor or someone, it's nice to have positive kind of mixed in with the negative sometimes. And I know I certainly try to do that with my students as well, so that we can have a positive, upbeat communication as opposed to a negative communication. Yeah, we often call that the sandwich. There's something positive before and after a negative comment. A prevalent and highly inappropriate writing style is the use of texting abbreviations. These abbreviations have no place in the professional environment. And we kind of already talked a little bit about this with the acronym section. And this is just a quote from a professor here at Empire State, kind of reiterating that, that it's inappropriate to be using texting styles in a professional communication. Michael wrote earlier that he agrees from personal mistakes made in correspondence that you can't take it back. And that's very true, Michael. I think we've all been there when we've sent an email too quickly, or even sent an email and not double-checked who we were sending it to, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I always say if you're writing an email to someone to put in the to section last, to make sure that you can't send it to someone if you're not ready to. And always check who you're sending it to, because sometimes you mean to hit forward and you accidentally hit reply, and then you're saying something you don't mean to. And especially if you're worked up about something, if you can write an email and then sit on it, like just don't send it for a little while and then come back to it and reread it. I always think that's a good technique to think about. Just you want to calm down a little bit sometimes before you send something. How is it going to be perceived by the other person? And is it going to make them more angry or more likely to help you? And sometimes you want to temper those ideas when sending out an email. And then the last comment was get straight to the facts or reason of the email. If background is needed, better to have it as an attachment. And if it's a long email, this person says they only skim it. We talked a little bit about this in the beginning, using bullet points or being very clear about what you're writing about. Some people think this about subjects too, so when you write the subject matter of your email, get straight to the point in the subject line too. What is it that you're talking about or you're writing about? Getting 15 emails a day that the subject is hi doesn't really tell me, why you're communicating with me or that I need to get to you quickly. And again, a long email, a lot of professors and mentors get tons of email a day. So if it is long, they may only skim it and they may miss exactly what it is that they're looking to respond to from you. Any thoughts or questions on these?
Okay, so for this slide, we're actually going to send you the PowerPoint presentation, but we've already pretty much addressed this slide here. So it's, do you address inappropriate behavior, and if so, how? Again, we've talked about, writing emails totally in caps locks and how that can, feel to the person receiving the email. Again, especially if you work in an environment where you're using your computer all the time, we forget that we can actually get up and walk to another office and address somebody in person, or pick up the phone and address somebody over the phone, and things can be clarified and resolved much more quickly and efficiently that way. So we're just going to go to the next slide and discuss a little bit about what tips and strategies are for e-writing. So check who your recipients are. Sometimes we forget things are automated right now, and you have the automate key on, and you type FA, and you don't realize that you sent something to your father instead of sending it to Bill or Frank down the hallway or whatever. So make sure that you send the email to the right recipient. So my resolution for that is, after you actually don't put in the person that you're sending it to until the end of you writing the email. When you've completed writing the email, then put the recipient in, so that if you have a trigger finger, you don't just go and hit send without checking who the person is. Think before sending an email. If it's something that you feel very emotional about, it just made your face get really hot and you are shaking about it, even if you're unsure if your wording is correct, sometimes I'm thinking, was I really clear? You might just want to think before sending, save it as a draft, wait a couple of minutes, come back to it, reread it. double check your grammar and spelling. Again, we have programs now that will check it for you. But definitely still reread things, because there are things that, Microsoft Word or, Gmail or Yahoo cannot catch. Things like homonyms and acronyms and different things like that. It's there, here, things like that, that, email or Microsoft Word aren't going to be able to detect. Be careful the way you use humor and sarcasm. Sometimes this can be very, very difficult to sense in an email or, an e-writing mode. So, if it's not extremely obvious to you, or you feel like it's an inside joke and you're including people that don't necessarily, interact with you on a regular basis, they might not understand what your humor is. So just be cognizant of that. Please remember that email is an official record of communication. In a serious circumstance, it can be used against you, in the court of law. A lawyer can pull this. Even if you press erase, it's still in your computer and can be retrieved from your computer. So just keep that in mind. Deleting a file, again, like I just said, doesn't mean that it's gone forever. It can be retrieved from your CPU, from your computer. So just, have that in your mind with your, if you're trying to correspond with somebody, or you're, corresponding with a friend over an email and it's not work related, to, have in mind that your job can retrieve that email, and they do know, what's going on the work computer. Yeah.
We have here just some e-resources, and again, we're not going to go over all of them now because we are kind of running out of our time. We will send a PowerPoint to you so you can access these then. Some are just scheduling tools, ways to share documents with coworkers, and helpful websites to make sure that your grammar and spelling is appropriate in your email. We also have at the end of the slideshow some top 10 tips for e-writing. And again, we'll send the PowerPoint to you so that you can kind of go through them and read through this at your own leisure. But certainly if you have any questions about it afterwards, you could always email Dana or I with those. But it is 1 o'clock. We wanted to be cognizant of people's time. But if anyone has any questions before we sign off, or comments or things of that nature, if you just want to go ahead and type those into the chat box, and Dana and I will field those. And if not, we thank you for joining us. We will be sending out the PowerPoint, and I believe the audio, Terry said as well. And Terry is sending you guys our email addresses right now. So if you have any questions after the fact, you can certainly email us after the end of the presentation too.
This is Teresa again. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I should receive the recorded link by the end of the day, and I will send that to everyone along with the PowerPoint presentation. Enjoy the day. Thank you.